Hi guys, Colleen from Walking the Resonant Path here. I just wanted to tell you about a book I've just finished reading, and when I say just finished, I mean I closed the book about 10 minutes ago. This is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, and this is a classic novel. It was written in the 1920s, so you may have to go to a secondhand bookshop to find it if you want it after I tell you about it. Elizabeth von Arnim, for those who don't know, is a very famous writer in novelist in classical circles. She wrote Elizabeth and Her German Garden. She wrote Vera. She wrote about 21 or 22 novels. She was born in Sydney, but she's actually known as an English novelist because she spent a lot of time in England. And she also had to flee the war in Germany. She had a pretty hard life. She had to flee the war in Germany. She went to live in Switzerland. She also had to sadly leave her daughter in the grave in Germany because her daughter actually died of pneumonia at the age of 16, one of her daughters. She actually had an affair with the novelist H.G. Wells, and the novelist E.M. Forster, he tutored her other children. If you don't know who E.M. Forster is, he wrote Room with a View, Howard's End, those sorts of things. But anyway, I'll read you the back of the book and then I'll tell you what I thought of it. Colour, fragrance, light, sea. Instead of Shaftesbury Avenue and the wet omnibuses and the fish department at Shoalbred's, and dinner, and tomorrow the same, and the day after the same, and always the same. A discreet advertisement in the Times, addressed to those who appreciate wisteria and sunshine, is a prelude to a revelatory month for four very different women. High above a bay on the Italian Riviera stands San Salvatore, a medieval castle. Beckoned to this haven are Mrs. Wilkins, Mrs. Abernaut, Mrs. Fisher, and Lady Caroline Dester, each quietly craving a respite. Lulled by the Mediterranean spring, the violet mountains, and the sweet-scented flowers, they gradually shed their public skins and discover a harmony each of them have longed for, but none have ever known. First published in 1922, reminiscent of Elizabeth and Her German Garden, this delightful novel is imbued with the descriptive power and light-hearted irreverence for which Elizabeth von Arnim is so popular. Now, sadly for me, this totally missed the mark. I was looking forward to reading it. I thought it was going to be this great coming-of-age story of women in different eras, because some of the women were in their 30s, some were in their 20s, one was in her 60s. And I thought it was going to be about them finding themselves and finding their strength and being self-empowered and finding out who they were. And in the first couple of chapters, you really got that feeling that this was going to happen. Now, sadly, I think Elizabeth von Arnim thought unless she introduced men into the story, it wasn't going to be interesting. So, in the first couple of, I think about the third or fourth chapter, we get Mrs. Wilkins' husband, who she didn't really like and who she was trying to get away from and free from. But because she went to this castle and had this, freedom about her, felt good about herself, felt like that she should invite her husband up, who she didn't like, and he came up and he had this underlying thing where he wanted to impress the other ladies of the house because he thought he could get business from them. So he was all nicey nice, and then he fell back in love with his wife because she was more free and stuff. Which, okay, is very nice, but it's not the self-empowering, revelation that these women were supposed to have. And then Mrs. Abernaut's husband actually came up to see Caroline Dester, who thought he was in love with. But then he didn't know where his wife had gone because he was somebody who didn't really care where his wife was gone because she'd become God-fearing and he didn't like the way she was. But when he got there, he realised his wife was one of the other guests, and Caroline Dester, who came to see, was one of the other guests. And, that was never found out because Lady Caroline Dester, figured out what was going on, and she sort of politely protected him, even though she wasn't interested in him in that way. She politely protected him and didn't let on to the wife that she was the actual one that came here to see her. And the wife and the husband fell in love again because of the magic of the medieval castle. And I just thought, oh my gosh, she said it was going to be, and I read, and I quote again, a revolutionary tale about women, different women, finding themselves. No. They found their love again, or finding harmony. They found their love again and they found their husband, but they never got found out. Like Mrs. Wilkins never knew that her husband came for business and clients, and Mrs. Abernaut never realised that her husband came for Lady Caroline Dester at first. And so, I really think it disappointingly missed its mark because it had the potential, the absolute potential to be what it said about these women finding themselves and understanding themselves. And Mrs. Wilkins could have figured out that her husband wasn't very nice and decided to stand on her own 2 feet and tell him to go away. And then what even annoyed me further was there's this guy called Mr. Briggs. When he came to the castle, he's the one that owned the castle. He was in love with Mrs. Wilkinson. He thought she was the best thing she'd ever seen and everything, until he saw Caroline Dester. And Caroline Dester was supposed to be this absolute beauty, so beautiful you couldn't believe it. And then said, oh, the lady he thought he loved paled in comparison, and there was nothing in his eyes except for this Lady Dester, and that he became, a simpering idiot because he couldn't believe, how gorgeous she was. Well, firstly, that's not very nice of men to just go, oh, if I really like this other person and really love them and like the way they are. And even though this Caroline Dester was rude and not very nice, that men would become a simpering idiot and forget about the other person. I think that does a disservice to men to say things like that, for a start. But also, secondly, to say that you don't notice if beautiful people are rude. Because I kept saying that, when Caroline was rude to everybody, nobody noticed because she was so beautiful. Well, that's ridiculous. I've met beautiful people before, both men and women, and you still notice when they're rude to you, and you still don't like them when they're rude to you. You don't just go, oh, they mustn't mean it. Oh, how lovely are they? That's ridiculous. So I think this book missed its mark on several levels, and I think it had the potential at the beginning to be really good and about them finding their way and finding their freedom and knowing who they are. But sadly, I think it missed its mark when they introduced a man for every single woman there. And they basically all were in love and were happily in love by the end. And I think that is utterly ridiculous. I'm very sorry because Elizabeth von Arnim, obviously people like her. This is a classic novel read by, thousands and thousands of people throughout time, and she's a good writer. And I like the descriptions of the medieval castle. I love the descriptions of the garden and the Mediterranean Sea, and all of that was beautiful. And I liked the women. Like, I liked Mrs. Wilkes, I liked Mrs. Avenant, I liked Mrs. Fisher. I wasn't here or there on Caroline Dester, but I liked most of the women. But sadly, you just felt the need to stick all these men in, and they couldn't find their own way, and they couldn't understand themselves without them. And I think that was really kind of sad, and it totally missed the mark. So sadly, for me, The Enchanted April was not for me. But you might like it if you like love stories, because more became a sort of love story, or a story about, realizing, well, really one of the things they said is that if you're beautiful, you can love. If you feel beautiful, you can love. And if you love, then you are looked at as beautiful. So I guess that was the underlying theme, but really it was supposed to be a theme of, women going away and finding themselves without the men, and it didn't eventuate. And I was kind of disappointed about that. So anyway, this is The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, and I'm only sadly going to give it 2 cauldrons because I don't think it really lived up to its mark. So that's The Enchanted April by Elizabeth von Arnim, 2 cauldrons. I hope you have a glorious day and do whatever resonates within your soul. Bye now.